Today's podcast is brought to you by Funny Bone Broth, now available at Eataly and McEwen's in the TD Center. Or you can visit them at funnybonebroth.com.
In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast. Ben Grant, joined by JB. This is our CFL Winter Meetings podcast, I guess for lack of a better name. I think mostly what we're going to talk about today is going to center around the CBA, which, as you remember, was signed like on the eve of training camp last year, and it's so odd. Like basically the teams didn't really have a chance to look through it, and we kind of played the season in this sort of void, and now they're having a chance to sit down and look at some of these changes and say, okay, well let's look at what the league is going to look like this coming season. If you want a full breakdown of this, because there's a lot of details, I highly recommend Jonathan Hudson's piece on 3 Down Nation. He goes into everything. We'll touch on a few things today that I think have an impact on the Argos specifically and Argo fans. But if you want a thorough breakdown, he did an excellent job. So check out 3 Down Nation. And Hudson has all your questions answered if you want to do some more detail. But for the Cole's Notes version, for Argos fans, we are here. The changes that they made with regards to global players, you now are going to have 2 global players on your game day roster and a total of 5. That's a lot of global players suddenly on a football team.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that the Argos were caught by surprise or didn't really know how to adapt to this change last year. There wasn't really any impact on the squad with the global players. And to my mind, this is exactly the kind of area that is ripe for market inefficiency. Is new, teams aren't totally sure how to do it. They don't necessarily have a framework or connections for scouting, for deciding who to take. And when it's so new and fresh like this, if you look at Winnipeg, who got pretty solid contributions from all 3 of their global players last year, this is a huge area. It's like the Blue Jays and the Dominican Republic. It is absolutely an untapped resource that the Argos have to dump money into to try and find players instead of fighting for the same American guys that everybody knows about and is looking for.
We're always frustrated by the fact that they often can't use that MLSE money because of cap restrictions. They can travel their scouts around a ton. So, like, they're going to have, obviously, the Combine in Toronto, but there are going to be global players that can't get to the Combine in Toronto. So you're going to have a ton of guys coming to Combines in places like Helsinki in Finland, Paris, somewhere in England, Florence, Italy, Frankfurt, Germany, Tokyo, Copenhagen, Mexico City. And so they've got to use that MLSE money to send their guys there so they can see these guys in person, do interviews, talk to them, and find those diamonds in the rough.
I think it's the parallel to, Espi Guerrero, the super scout, to me, are crystal clear. To pay the money, beat the other teams to finding a guy whose whole job it is to find players in a certain part of the world. So you can't search Europe. It's too big for one guy or 2 people. But this is where the research has to come in. They have to find an area where they feel they can generate talent and just be ahead of that curve. And that's the kind of, progressive franchise thinking that I've been pounding the table for, and I want from the Argos. I want them to be smarter than the other teams, not tougher, not stronger, not grittier, all those terms. I want them to be smarter than the other teams, and this is a perfect avenue for them to show that, to do that.
I think most of the other teams, and hopefully Toronto is not among them here, are going to be relying on Greg Quick, who is hired as the league director of global scouting, and he's passing information on to all the CFL clubs. But if we can get our own guy in there,
Right.
making his own assessments, and maybe more quickly than the other teams are finding out about stuff. If we're the first on the floor, then obviously that's an advantage to the Argos.
And the Red Wings did it with their Swedish and their Russian scouts, and turned their team into a dynasty, because if you can find these guys before, now everybody in Sweden and Finland is being scouted, and that market inefficiency is gone. But then they were able to steal guys in the 8th round, for God's sakes.
And we've seen it happen, like you mentioned, the Blue Jays and Dominican, and what about the Raptors too?
Right.
With Masai. And he's done a great job, bringing in players that no one had really even heard much of.
We had the Brazilian Kevin Durant for
a
couple of years.
That's right. If only we were 2 years
closer.
But
But that's exactly it. It's not. Doesn't mean like we're gonna suddenly go find, a Japanese player who's the MVP of the league next year.
No, but you're looking for if you get contributors from those positions, that's a huge win.
Huge win.
What you don't want is to have your 2 global players sitting on the bench the whole game.
Come on, how is our kicker not from Mexico?
Well,
the land of soccer. There's no way we can't find a great kicker.
I would suggest that almost any country that's not Canada or America probably has a large number of guys that you could try out as kickers. And again, nothing against Tyler Crapina and McMaster, but let's make use of our global players and find somebody that can be contributing, if not multiple global players that contribute.
Yeah, I think it'll be a tremendous litmus test for the franchise as to how successful they are at finding global players. And I think the measurement will come at the end of the year. I think that if we are able to find successful global players, it means 2 things. One, it means our coaches are good and they can make a player better, which is a great sign. And 2, means that our talent evaluation is better than other teams. So I think if you're looking for a metric as to how smart and effective your coaching staff is and your pro personnel department is, that is right there where you're going to find the difference.
Let's move on to talk a little bit about Canadianized Americans. So American players that can count as national players. There are a couple ways that this can happen. So one way, which I don't think is going to happen at all, I don't think you're going to see any of these, but maybe one, but obviously this isn't going to move the needle a lot, is an American or actually a global player who ends up attending a U Sports school for 3 years, graduates with a degree. They can now count as a national player, but I don't think we're talking about a large number of students that are going to qualify there. But the one that is a bit more interesting is that an American player that is on the same CFL roster for 3 consecutive years counts as a national player. Now, that only applies to the starter ratio, not to the roster allocation, but to have an American player on the same CFL team for 3 years, suddenly national player, that's big, and there's some incentive there to now stay in the league. And now if you bounce around, if you're not on the same CFL team, then it's 4 years. So if you play for multiple teams, then 4 years in the CFL, you're considered a national player just for the starter ratio. But that means something.
Well, once they become a Canadian player, my question is, do they have to wear plaid a certain percentage of the week?
Absolutely. Well, I think that goes without saying. And they also have to start saying out and about as we do.
I think that it's a good plan to try and convince American players to stay. I think that roster stability is important for developing fans. I think that you don't want to get into a position, in some ways, as the NCAA is in with the one and done, where you have this sort of 50%, 60% turnover, and you've got all new guys every year. And I think that it would be nice to have players play with the team for 3 and 4 years.
And the CFL is aware of this. Like they've been fighting this for a while. Like, how can we get guys? And we see that with the contract rules. Like, how can we get guys to stay here longer? But yeah, this is a nice incentive because that's a pretty big advantage for you as an American player who suddenly now qualifies as a national starter. Now, it hurts Canadian players a little bit, not in terms of the total number on teams, but it could, in theory, impact the number of Canadian-born starters.
Yeah, you look at the different loophole possibilities. Will they ask Canadian players to fake an injury so that an American player is able to replace them on the field?
And there are weird rules about that too. Like that gets pretty murky when we start looking into that. And hopefully,
but again, if you're a 3-year player, probably means you have a decent sized contract,
right?
So are they going to replace a very cheap Canadian with an expensive American? Maybe, but financially, I think it
you certainly couldn't do that a lot.
In an uncapped world, maybe. In a capped world, I think you'd be hard pressed. I think what it does help is not punishing teams, or I guess it rewards teams who have decent depth. That if you have a player and you've had them for a couple of years, and a Canadian player goes down, you don't have to then find another Canadian player instead of the player you've had in your system for 3 years.
The other change that I think really might impact the Argos because of Michael O'Connor is the quarterback rule. So the quarterback rule is for the 2020-2021 seasons, each club must dress at least 2 quarterbacks for every regular season playoff and Grey Cup games. So that's gone down from 3. So now teams don't have to can dress 3. They could dress 6, but they're not going to, in my opinion, dress 3 if they don't have to dress 3. I think you're only going to see teams dress 2 quarterbacks for next season. And I think that's going to cost Canadian quarterbacks jobs. Because in a situation like the Argos, let's say we end up, whoever the starter is, whether it's Bethel-Thompson, Dakota Prukop, someone else that's brought in who's an American, are they going to trust Michael O'Connor as the only other quarterback on the roster, on the game day roster? I'd like to say yes. I'm not sure. The answer is yes. And he's sort of in a unique position. Like, how many other Canadian quarterbacks are there around the league that are going to be dressed on game day with this new rule?
It's a move towards the NFL idea that having 3 quarterbacks on your roster is really a bit of a waste in terms of that's another special teamer you can have, takes a little pressure off some of the guys who are having to play special teams and offense or defense. If you have one more guy in the mix, the number of times that the third quarterback ever plays is almost minimal. And really, at that point, if your third quarterback is playing, like, you might as well just go to a wildcat.
We had 3 quarterbacks playing in several games this year.
Yeah, it went very well.
Well, I thought the young guys looked pretty good, but again, that's a situation that we hope we're not in. Come October next year, where we've got 3 quarterbacks playing in every game. But you can still have your Canadian quarterback on a practice roster. But I liked the 3 quarterback rule because the teams were carrying an extra guy. And you're right. So what? Maybe that doesn't matter because we're not talking about these guys getting into a lot of games. But I still liked having teams having. I love the idea of every team having a Canadian quarterback dressed for every game. I think that helps the growth of the sport in this country. And I think this rule change, while I get it, does a bit of a disservice to Canadian players. And I think it allows people to be lazy. I think, force teams to carry a Canadian quarterback on their game day roster. Force them to find the best guy. Force them to, because they're there. We have good Canadian quarterbacks. Maybe not a lot of starting caliber quarterbacks, but certainly enough to be on a game day roster. And so force teams to find those guys.
And I would hope that each team, or certainly I would hope that the Argos have someone actively, or a group of people actively searching, parsing, analyzing the CBA in looking for any angle they can possibly game. Because this first year will definitely be the year where you might be able to game it, where you realize maybe if we dress another Canadian, that allows us to have another American. If we dress another Canadian quarterback as our third quarterback, maybe that lets us have another American position player. These are the angles that need to be looked at. But in truth, it was always a bit of a mirage. In terms of the Canadian quarterback, I don't think there was really any pipeline to developing Canadian quarterbacks, and so do I feel it makes a big difference if they're a practice squad or the water jug guy as the third QB? I didn't see any concerted effort to turn these third quarterbacks into anything other than,
clipboard holders, basically.
Practice arms.
Yeah, and they can still do that from the practice roster. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't mean as much as I'd like to think it does, but I like the idea of them being dressed on game day. I like the idea of looking down there and seeing a Canadian guy that's he's dressed. He's there. He's on the bench.
It's so hard to get past the American bias. That so many of the coaches and the org guys are American, and they're already disposed to not see a Canadian player in a skilled position. And, I think this is just, sort of finally getting rid of the illusion that these guys had a shot. Because I don't think they did. I don't feel like American coaches were keen on having a Canadian quarterback.
No, I think there's something to that. And it's so hard to get, like you're saying, coaches to give credit to Canadian quarterbacks unless they played in the States. And so that's why you see with O'Connor going down south, the reason teams took a chance at him was that he was, anyone that's coming from IMG Academy, they'll take a look at. But if he's coming from so-and-so high school in Ottawa, there's no chance.
Right.
Same guy, but it doesn't matter. So the guy from IMG goes to Penn State. The guy from whatever high school you want to name, ends up at best playing CIS.
Yeah, I think your only hope is to have a third roster spot that is for Canadian quarterbacks. If in some way,
and we've sort of gone through that, but
again,
it
maybe,
doesn't force you to put them
just
on the field.
Right.
So yeah,
it's
I don't know where we're going with that. Well, I'm depressed now. Why don't we move on to the next topic? Well, you don't want it.
I'm fine with no Canadian quarterbacks.
I would like to see teams forced to bring those Canadian quarterbacks up to speed. They're great athletes. Some of these guys have rocket arms, and they've got the intelligence and the know-how, but they're never given a chance. And I think if you give them a chance, not allow teams
maybe like
to do
a best ball, like a best ball golf tournament, you must play a Canadian quarterback for one of your
16 or your 18
one of your 18 games.
That just sounds so patronizing, though.
No,
but yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's the right idea. There's something there that's interesting, but I don't know.
I think the more you get Canadian university coaches in the system, I think the better chance you have of getting more Canadian university quarterbacks.
And there are a number, but there could certainly be more. There's some great CIS coaches, great Canadian-born CIS coaches. A lot of times that don't get chances. There's some in the league.
There are, but look, there's no doubt. Much like the NFL, it can be a closed circuit, and
a lot of the Canadians, a lot of the CFL coaches with CIS experience are Americans. They're Americans that were brought up to be head coaches of CIS teams that are now CFL coaches.
Yeah, it has been a slow American invasion that we should be aware of.
All right, let's move on to, I think, a natural transition into talking about something Coach Dinwiddie said up in Collingwood this week, mentioned when asked that he was very intrigued by McLeod Bethel-Thompson. And his comment, when you read it sort of on its own, it could just be coach speak. It could just be a coach not wanting to say that this player isn't going to cut it for him. But a lot of people chose to read into that Coach Dinwiddie is thinking about McLeod Bethel-Thompson as his starter next year. And maybe the fact that Arbuckle, his rights belong to Ottawa, that's probably going to turn into a contract. I think anyone who doesn't think that hadn't been discussed previously is being naive. So if Arbuckle's in Ottawa, is McLeod Bethel-Thompson maybe someone that Coach Dinwiddie is stuck with, or does he want Bethel-Thompson? If he's stuck with him, he has to say he wants him, and if he wants him, then obviously he would say he wants him. So what does this mean?
Well, you don't need to have detective like skills to notice that at the press conference he was not particularly in love with him.
But he hadn't watched film, and watching McLeod Bethel-Thompson lead the Argos to a 4-14
he was in the league. It's not like
record.
He's coming from Orlando. He was in the league. I'm sure Calgary had a fairly clear organizational wide opinion about who was good and who wasn't in the league. I agree with you. I think it. I mean, I'm sure Pinball thought this was a package deal.
That we bring Arbuckle through.
Yes. There is no way that they did not believe they had a package deal when they were hiring him to be their coach.
Then why not outbid Ottawa for Arbuckle's rights?
Well, I think they should. I think they should.
It's a bit late now.
Right. But I think I guess my guess would be that they were caught surprised by Ottawa. I think that maybe they thought that the league would, I don't know, lay down and feel like, okay, we've got the inside lane on signing this guy because we have his coach and they have a good relationship. And maybe Ottawa surprised them because Ottawa's, terrible. And maybe they, like a lot of teams, maybe they forgot Ottawa was in the league.
I don't think this is horrible for the Argos. I maintain that McLeod Bethel-Thompson, while he is not the best quarterback in the league, I think he is, at the very least, on par with Arbuckle, if not better than Arbuckle. I don't think in watching Arbuckle last year, there was nothing that stood out to me that made me think, wow, look at this guy. And I think that we don't know exactly what Dinwiddie's offense is going to look like next year, but I'm starting to get an idea of it watching a lot of Calgary film over the last couple of weeks as I start to look forward to what we can anticipate as a part of the Argos offense next year. And the stuff that Calgary's doing plays into Bethel-Thompson's strength. It's a lot of pocket passing. There's the quarterback's on the move a fair amount. They have a couple packages where the quarterback's on the move, but Bethel-Thompson's a good athlete. He runs well. He doesn't throw well on full sprint, but that's not the kind of out-of-the-pocket passing Calgary does. It's either drop back, sit in the pocket, and fire one, or it's take 3 or 4 steps on a rollout and toss one out to the flats. And Bethel-Thompson can do those things well. I wouldn't be surprised if Coach Dinwiddie, watching film of Bethel-Thompson all year long, loving the fact that this guy can launch at 70 yards downfield and is fairly mobile, that he's a guy that Dinwiddie says, you know what, I think we could certainly do worse than Bethel-Thompson.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think that love the one you're with is at work here, because I'm sure that financially maybe they were told that a bidding war with Ottawa is not in the cards. And
you don't think there's going to be a bidding war for Macbeth because he's a free agent? You don't think teams are going to be knocking the door down?
Who? No.
I have to agree with you on that. But but then there's some value there.
He's fine. And if Coach was told to eat the food that's in his kitchen, don't worry about going out to the restaurant, then, coach is going to get behind the food he had in the fridge.
Well, he sort of has to at that point.
Right. Well, I know he has to.
So you think this has been dictated for him?
Yeah, I think he's been told we're not getting, this is a done deal.
Here's your quarterback.
Ottawa's got this thing locked up, and we don't want to look like we lost a bidding war with the worst team in the CFL. And so we're not even going to pretend that we're interested in Arbuckle, even though we hired you specifically to get him.
I don't know if that.
Let's now shift gears.
I don't know if that's what happened.
And embrace
Macbeth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He doesn't do anything for me. I mean,
I certainly like him a lot more than you do. He wasn't my dream candidate for the job, but I'm okay with him. I still like Prukop, and I know everyone's tired of me talking about Dakota Prukop. I still think he's the guy. So I'm happy to bring back Macbeth, but I don't think you let Prukop get away, because I think if you let Prukop get away, he's going to be beating us 3 times a year for the next 10 years.
That you're quite excited to bring back all the players that led us to glory last year.
No, I'm not, though. I love all the new guys they've brought in. I think it's great that we brought in 14 defensive players so far. I think it's great that we brought in a dozen offensive players that weren't on the team. These are amazing changes. There needed to be change. I'm not sure that I don't think the biggest problem on the team was quarterback.
If Arbuckle's not there to be had, then I think that then Macbeth is the play.
But Arbuckle's not a god. He wasn't. He was fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think
he was a guy.
I think the hope is he has a ceiling. I think that we haven't seen yet. Does Macbeth have a ceiling we haven't seen yet?
I think we've seen what he can do. I don't think he's going to do anything next year that we haven't already seen, but with some better protection on the line, which has to be addressed, and kind of has to a degree, but needs to be addressed more. And with a system that's more suited to him. Remember last year, Bethel-Thompson spent most of the season playing an offense designed for James Franklin.
Yes,
and that's not his style.
Right, and it makes sense to make a decision early. If this is who the quarterback is, then we're going to build this around him
using Calgary's playbook. That's basically what those cater to Bethel-Thompson's strengths. He can run the Calgary offense, I think, just as well or better than Arbuckle. I don't know if I'd go as far to say Bo Levi Mitchell as well, but I think he can run it just as well, if not better than Arbuckle. And so I'm fine with that. So let's go to war with that.
And maybe I don't know. I don't know about the midseason quarterback trade market and what that will look like with only 2 quarterbacks on everybody's roster. I don't know if that will make it harder to trade. Like traditionally, CFL teams actually have gotten. You often get your quarterback via trade,
right?
Much more than say the draft, which is sort of the NFL model,
right?
A number of teams have gotten their quarterback from the Argos.
Yeah, pretty much. Is there anyone in the league not starting a quarterback that was a former Argo backup?
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's somebody hiding in the Calgary system that they can get as a backup. Yeah, I can't lie. I'm disappointed. I thought that we had a shot at Arbuckle.
I don't think that you shouldn't be disappointed. I'm telling you, this is nothing to be disappointed about. Arbuckle is fine, but McLeod Bethel-Thompson is also fine. And
right.
So,
well, we will record this, and then next year,
you think the Red Blacks
Ottawa
are going to be blazing past us, led by Arbuckle?
Well,
no, that's not going to happen. It's what's amazing is that
it better not is all I'm saying. It better not.
They were such a bad team. Like we were a bad team last year.
They were very bad.
And we crushed them. And they started out well, and then
they had clearly stopped trying.
Yeah, well, by the time we played them, they didn't even know who was on the team anymore.
No.
All right, let's move on to a couple of a re-signing and a signing today. So the Argos are bringing back Shaq Richardson, as announced today. I'm excited about that. I like Shaq, and the reason I like him the most, like obviously I like him as a player. I think he's great at anticipating. I love how he situationally anticipates those short outs and the hooks. We saw him with that wonderful pick against Hamilton last game of the season, where he totally knew what was going to happen and just took advantage of that with his football knowledge. But what I like most about him is that receivers hate playing against Shaq Richardson. They hate lining up against him because on the football field, he is just an absolute jerk, and that is what you want from your starting corners. He is such a pain to play against. He won't stop. He's just at you from the moment the whistle goes till the end of the game. He's in your face. He's knocking you down on every play. He's being physical. He's pesky. And I want a guy like that on my team. I loved watching receivers go out and seeing their lineup against Shaq last year and just be like, oh God.
I thought it was really a smart, low risk move when they brought him in.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're looking to do. You're looking to evaluate rosters. You're looking to weigh pros and cons, and if you see talent being underused or misused, then you go get it. And that is absolutely the way to build a team and the way to build. He is a player with a great. He's got a huge personality, and I think that's great. I agree with you. I think that it's important for the team to have an Argo player. That's when you are a franchise, is when you have a player and you're like, that guy's an Argo. And right now, that's not true. I mean, that doesn't mean anything right now. That guy's an Argo.
We haven't had it mean anything for quite a long time.
No, and it's very hard to achieve that. It's very difficult to do it because it means that you have an absolutely cohesive front office coaching staff that is in total agreement with who we are as a program and who we're looking for. And if you can get that, it is easier to do free agency correctly, to make trades, because you know what you're looking for. And when the guys come here, it fits perfectly. It sounds easy to do, but absolutely, he's the kind of player who you can build an identity around because he has such a large personality and his aggressive attitude on the field. I think that's fantastic. I think that's exactly who you try to build around, and then you hope that it's not, you hope that it takes and that the other guys, build around that, and that you don't just end up, having guys who, you got to have a coordinator who also wants to unleash hell. And,
but between him and Alden Darby, I think those are pieces you can work around. And they're obviously trying to rebuild the defensive secondary. Jeff Richards was signed today as well. That'll make the 10th DB that the Argos have brought in since the season ended, that the Argos have signed to a contract. So you got Alden Darby, you got Shaq Richardson.
Yeah, terrific.
And 10 new guys. Let's take a look and see what we got. And Jeff Richards is interesting. He's 29, which is a little bit of a drawback, but you remember he won the Grey Cup for Ottawa, had a great season, ended up with the last 2 years in the NFL, mostly with the Chargers, bounced around a little bit too. But yeah, he's follows that same mold that they're looking for, 6'2", 210, just like pretty much every other DB they brought in.
I think it's great too. Bring a guy who played in the NFL, is not getting as many reps there as he will here. I think that those guys who come from the NFL don't feel like they're demoted. I think that they feel like...
Well, especially because he's been in the league before, too. Like,
right.
He knows what the CFL is about. He won a championship. So he brings that to the Argos as well. The knowledge of, hey, I played, I won, and I've got some NFL experience, and I'm coming back to lead some of these young guys.
And, much like if you have a soccer player, playing the Bayern program, it's tremendous. Look, if he's in the NFL, he's getting the world-class coaching. I'm not saying anything about CFL coaching, but, if you're in the NFL, you're getting the best coaching in the world. And that can't hurt in terms of things he's learned, things he can bring to the team, attitude that he saw guys have on his team. I mean, that Charger defense is terrific.
Yeah, no, it's true. And
they flew to the ball. I mean, if we could have the Charger defense, I mean, that kind of attitude, that kind of belief, which brings us to, of course, the question: who is going to be the coordinator, and will they have to work for free?
They may. I think it's a little tight for budget.
I trust Pinball's phone.
I trust his phone. I trust the man himself as well.
I trust.
But
I mean,
man, they're going to be tight. Like, I just kind of
Pinball,
looking at the number. Like, we know so little about the numbers, but from what we know, they're not going to have a lot of. They just don't have a lot of room for salary.
No, it's a guaranteed contract. They have to pay the full year for him.
Right.
Last year they announced early Feb. I think just before free agency. That would be my guess. You're not going to go looking for free agents without being able to tell them who their coordinator is. So you're going to, if you're selling the program, you're going to need to make that announcement there. And I think it's great these guys they've been signing from a defensive point of view. It's going to attract other guys who want to be on that kind of aggressive group. But, who they sign as coordinator will be important because that will be about that fit with these guys.
Well, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and tell everyone in the world you know about this podcast. And for JB, this is Ben Grant. Until next time, see ya.